So Dr. Ieuan Evans grew up in South Wales on a small mixed farm on the Gower Peninsula. He received an honors degree in Agricultural Botany in 1963 and then completed his PhD in Plant Pathology and Virology at the University of Florida in 1969. He was funded initially from Pennsylvania and later in Florida by benevolent Welsh connections. Dr. Evans was a faculty member of the University of Guelph, Ontario, but spent most of his academic research time on practical problem solving for agriculture in Alberta. Search Google with the phrase Evans Cherry and Grain News Ieuan Evans to see some of his past and most recent work via the internet. From articles to videos and podcasts, Dr. Evans is a prolific writer and educator. A couple of other highlights were solving ergot control in small grain cereals and controlling bacterial ring rot in potatoes, both major agronomic diseases. Dr. Evans was also inducted into the Alberta Agricultural Hall of Fame in 2012. In his presentation, Dr. Evans will talk about lily killers galore. Thank you, Ieuan.
Thank you very much. I always thought BC stood for Backwoods Canada when I moved to Alberta. And you know, there is a connection between Victoria and Alberta. Do you know what it is?
They were married.
Victoria was Alberta's mother. Really? She was Alberta Louise. Anyway, or Louise Alberta. But anyway, I started growing lilies, Asiatics, later on Marigans, and losing lilies. And since then, I moved on to Marigans because they were way too expensive to buy. I was paying $40 for them 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And now people complain if they pay 10, eh? Now anyway, I had lots of fun raising lilies. And like right now, I still pollinate and cross lilies. I'm working with some of Brian, what's his name, Berkey or something? I was in the greenhouse the other day, and a friend of mine, Surrender, walked in. He's an Indian fella, and he and I raised lots of fruit trees and stuff, which we brought illegally from Russia and Finland, you know, because Alberta's a cold climate, and we can't grow the BC stuff, so we have to get it from a place where it's colder. But anyway, he walked into me and he said, because I was reaching for these Brian lilies, they were on benches and they were like my head high and higher. And he looked at me and he said, "You look like Donald Trump." Oh. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, your face is orange with pollen and your hair's yellow."
That's good.
Anyway, could you get the slides, please?
Yep. Is that the one you want?
Could be.
That's the title.
Yeah, that's the title. Okay, you know, I grew hordes of lilies, right? Asiatics, beautiful ones. And I went lots of places in Ontario and everywhere else in Alberta. And, you know, we selected from them. And we got these lilies and thought, oh, we've really made the thing, eh? By the way, if anyone, there's a password here if you want a computer. We thought, no problem. But you know, next slide. You know, these lilies started disappearing on me. What was wrong with them? And of course, people came up with asinine things like lack of fertilizer. I'm a fertility specialist. lack of moisture. I spray a pond. They had a limited lifespan. And of all things, a virus. Yeah, the Dutch have lots of virus because they grow every liliaceous plant in the world, eh? I think some of the Dutchmen do, I think. But anyway, they were on about, you know, all these different things, acid soils, alkaline soils, fungus, fungi, fungi, foot rot. You think of fungus. There were fungi killing your lilies. They're in the soil, and every time you sold a bulb, you know, if it didn't come from Holland, from a tissue culture operation, the bulb was infested with 1, 2, 3, or 4 different fungi. You cleaned it up, But don't forget, a teaspoon of soil will have billions of microorganisms in them. Just, they're loaded, so you clean about. But just there's plenty of these fungi on it. And if you look at the list there, I've written them up, and how to kill your fungus, how to kill your lilies, the lily destroyers. There's this, you look at the second sheet. Okay, they're in the books, the last issues. Chuck has put them in the last two issues, the March issue and the June issue. And read them, because next year there'll be an exam on them. And, well, there will be. You have to stay in the society. That's my proposal, anyway. Anyway, if you look at the diseases galore, I'll read them out for you, because it's gobbledygook to you. You won't understand it, and you'll forget it. But, you know, these destructive lily bulb diseases, one were, I had them done in a lab. We have some excellent diagnosticians in Alberta. By the way, we're one of the best diagnosticians in the world in West Saanich. Peter Ellis used to work for me. He does all the virus diagnostics for Canada on potatoes and you know, for strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, and for the west coast of the US. I mean, you think, oh, you have to go somewhere for expertise? It's right here. Anyway, he's going to visit me tomorrow probably. The destructive diseases that we were to isolate and identify as past ones were Globosporangium macrosporum. It used to be called Pythium ultimum, but you know, plant pathologists or you know, people who get into these things like fancy names. You know, they want to change it. Every time they have a meeting, they have to change the name of something. I worked with an aphid one time. It was called a turnip aphid, but they changed its botanical name 6 times in 10 years. But it was still a turnip aphid. But anyway, this fungus is a water mold. And if you go wettish soil, your lily didn't die from the wet soil or the moist soil. It was disease. The fungus takes the roots out. And when I'd see lilies grow one year, 6 foot in the new soil, then the next year, 3 foot, then 2 foot, then gone. And I get people say, oh, the voles did it, the mice did it, you know, or the lily had a short lifespan. And especially the more articulate people who go chasing wild lilies, they go, oh, they have limited lifespans. BS, they bring them into contact with diseases. It's like saying, if you went to New Zealand and brought in some sheep and put it in a pen in, say, Argentina with all kinds of different sheep, it will pick up disease, you know, and die because it was not used to those diseases there or whatever, right? In other words, diseases kill, fungal diseases. They kill, and especially in most plants. Now anyway, Globosporium, macrosporium, it's in the last issue, it's in the March issue. The June issue. Rhizoctonia solanae, it's always been around, it's a strain that goes after lilies. Illonectria species. You know, you've heard of ginseng, right? How the wonders it does to you? Ginseng, the biggest ginseng grower, one of the biggest is Ontario, right? They export it to the Middle East, especially to Korea and China, ginseng. They can't find any land to grow this stuff anymore because the fungus there lasts for 20 years or more in the soil. You put a ginseng crop, takes 5 years, they make a lot of money, they sell it. But once it's grown in that field and a disease comes in, that land is useless even for 20 years. The fungus lives there, it's lethal. Now, you all eat potatoes, I assume, right? At least potato chips. Now, every potato you've eaten has been through tissue culture. 6 or 7 years earlier, 7 years earlier. It was in a lab, a little seedling. They have to keep them clean. And they give them to farmers who multiply them up, called seed growers. And these seed growers in Canada and the US multiply up these potatoes, then ship them to the commercial growers zone, what do you call it? Section 2 or Section 3 or whatever, they have different names for them anyway in different states. And they grow them in fields where they run a 3 or 4 year rotation. If you go to Idaho, for example, they grow potatoes, right? Lots of it. By the way, Washington and Oregon grow more potatoes than Idaho. But anyway, Alberta sells lots of seeds to them anyway. But they grow the potatoes there, right? Well, those spuds, then after those rotations in fields for 3 or 4 years, they're in and out, in and out. Now, we could grow lilies that way. In other words, we get new ones all the time, and they last a year or two, just like petunias. Because if you try growing in the garden, they die, they get murdered. So anyway, the fourth one is a fusarium, which is common. But I won't go into that, so I'll start showing the slides now. Next slide. So you've got this killer. Now, marigons are much more resistant. And I've got marigons, and the bottom of my garden, I threw some seed in there initially, and I don't know why. Go white or pink, pink or white, white or pink, pink or white. I don't know why, but there's thousands of them. Next slide. See, the marigons there are in the bush under the trees, their natural habitat. Now, in the lily book, the Mardigan book, it says, do not plant under trees. I know what the hell Gene was talking about, but he's got heavy clay or something. But you do plant under trees, if you can, whether they will live or thrive. Now, I don't have any facts on this, and you can accuse me of BS, but I suspect that the trees and the other plants will actually physically attack fungi as well. In other words, plants have defense mechanisms. They're not defenseless. They don't sit there like, you put a piece of, put some wheat on the table and it's dry and it stays okay. You put the wheat, you germinate it and it doesn't rot. But you put a piece of bread on, it's full of rot, right? There are all kinds of fungi that will attack. But plants have defense mechanisms. They're living bloody things. They're not just entities. Lilies are living things with defense mechanisms. Well, I think trees and shrubs help those defense mechanisms, particularly for things like marigons. Next slide. That's part of the garden there. Next slide. Now, that's some of the shows we run. We run a mardigan show in Alberta, just on mardigons. And we used to have lots of growers. We still have quite a few growers, and they do very well in a cold, cold climate. And guess who? He doesn't exhibit in the show, but you've heard of Darren Crook? Well, why doesn't he have plant? Where is he? He's 1,000 kilometers north of Edmonton. We're north of north, right? I mean, he gets up in the morning and he ushers the polar bears off his land. Well, how can he grow them up there? Why doesn't he have disease up there? He's never brought any bulbs on his land. It's all been done on seed. Seed or tissue culture or whatever, right? So, I mean, technically, if you want to grow lilies, you get a new piece of land, seed, tissue culture, bulbils, anything to avoid diseased bulbs. And diseased bulbs are present around the world, especially in Europe and North America. I can't go to any garden in North America that have grown lilies that doesn't have disease. And those lilies that still persist there, guess what? They're generally resistant ones. You've heard of corsage?
Yeah.
Well, the reason it's not a very outstanding lily, but it's resistant to root rot. And funny enough, almost all the root rot resistant ones are early bloomers. I'm not sure what the connection is. I'm finding out, but I've done a lot of research. I'm not Dutch. Well, if you're not Dutch, you're not much, right? But there's this tendency to think they have all the brains in the world. They're pretty good, but they're kind of dogmatic too. Anyway, next slide. I mean, some of us, like, this is bred in Edmonton, and Terry Willoughby, and it turns out to be resistant too. It's still around. It's got resistance. I'm not sure what the basis of resistance is, but if they're still around, they're resistant. So when I plant out lilies, I can plant out hundreds of seedlings in a row. I treat them like carrots. I treat marigons like carrots. I don't go this elaborate little tissue culture chamber and pots and stuff. You get the seed. How do you plant carrots? You draw a line an inch deep, and you put the carrot seed in. Well, with lily seed, you plant, marigons in August, and you plant out July, and you plant Asiatics in March, April. And they'll grow. Surprisingly, they'll grow, in new soil. But they'll grow, and they grow easily. The complex thing about the mysticism that men put around lily growing. all this and then touch this twice and move this thing. You know, most of it is procedure. Just like going to a procedure on a royal wedding or something. It's all procedure. They still have been bad. Anyway, next slide. What do you think that is?
Seedling.
That's just a bunch of seedlings I put in a pot. I can put that pot in a bigger pot and put it outside. I have about 30 or 40 Asiatics there. And they grow nicely. But if I put it in a new part of the garden, they'll grow and flower. Next slide. See, I put them in the garden. I'm not sure of this now. I can be wrong on this, but I did have lilies there 10 or 15 years ago. Now, the fungus may still be there, unfortunately. But that row looked fabulous last year. This year, it was colder. It was drier and very dry. Now, whether Asiatics don't like sandy soil, that soil is almost pure sand. Whether they don't like sandy soil or whatever, I'm not quite sure what the reason is. But there are standouts amongst them that are doing well. I think they'll be either resistant ones or ability to withstand sandy soil. But this is how we select out things, eh? You look for characters that you put under stress. Next slide. And there's your bulbs and stuff. Now, those bulbs are clean. Like hell they are. They're loaded with all kinds of fungi all over the roots and in the cracks and bits and pieces in them. So, you know, I mean, I didn't bring any messy ones here because you might get a thing. But I could have brought you some bulbs that with all of these side roots rotted. And that's what happens. In other words, the side roots and the stem roots get rotted. Most lily bulbs, by the way, feed on the stem roots, not the side roots. You put the daffodil, it feeds on the root rods underneath the bulb. But if you put a lily in, it's the stem roots that gives the most of the feeding. That's why you plant them 5 inches deep. Not because the bulb is the one to give the big thing. It's the stem bulb. It's the stem roots. You want them to grow rapidly and provide the nutrients, eh? So anyway, I'm going to give you the 5 foot, 10 foot lily. Next one. Now I grow marigons this year. I used some crappy ones, old ones, so I didn't get the success I thought I'd get. But marigons are quite easy to grow. I scale them in, I should scale them in September, but I scale them in October. It was late scaling. I put them in. It was a mild winter. They didn't have as much chilling as they could have. So anyway, but I let them in there. In those, I grow them in these closed little plastic containers, right? Do you know plastic will allow oxygen in? They won't smother. Plastic bags let oxygen in, but don't let water out or in them. So in other words, you can put a plant and leave it perpetually in a plastic bag, as long as the water stays in there, right? Now, you can get those containers. You don't have to put holes in them, like some people do. You have those little plastic ones you buy the ones that you buy the what do you call them, the olives in, eh? Those little sealed containers. And you use peat moss. Why do you use pure peat moss? Canadian peat moss. No, I'm just kidding. Minnesota's got peat moss too. I wouldn't use that. No, I'm just kidding. But you use peat moss. It's acid. It's acidic. And you put the scales in there. I'll put a double or triple fungicide on them. And you put the scales in this peat moss, right? And the peat moss takes care of most fungi and bacteria. That's why it's still peat moss. It's kind of, it's like a bottle of wine. You can leave it on the table for years. Well, some people can, but but I mean, it'll stay still. It doesn't break down. People made wine in the past so they could actually preserve grapes. But anyway, these things, I take them in the spring. I give them 3 weeks of 3 months of heat, 3 months of cold, and in March I take those containers and dump them into these pots. I literally dump them. I put an inch of soil in those pots, 5-inch pots. I dump them in, put some soil on top, give them a watering, and off they come. No special, control. Next slide. See, and if you did a good year, they'd be like that. Those are marigons. I didn't give them any soft-handed or anything. They grow vigorously. You treat them like an agricultural crop. Not with gloves and, oh, we did this and we did that. We ran 3 times around the table. Go ahead, next one. See, and they grow vigorously, some better than others. Next one. And I mean, you plant them out there, and there's 2 or 3 pots there, see them? You jam them together. Oh, plant them 6 inches apart. That's absolute BS. You jam them in because if I leave that now for another year or two, there'll be about 10 or 20 bulbs of saleable size, and probably about 30 or 40 that are small, and you stick them back in a hole. And say, next year, ladies, or next year again, you know what I mean? Or 2 years down the road. And you can get a supply of marigolds from that particular variety. You push them in, you know. This like, you've had apple trees. You've had people say, plant them 15 foot apart. What abject nonsense. You plant apple trees 2 feet apart, 3 feet apart. And commercial guys plant them 4 foot apart. Because you don't want a tree, you want a bush. Can Granny climb a 15-foot ladder to get the apples down when they're 15 foot apart? And you have to wait 2 lifetimes? No. You grow apple bushes. By the way, I'll ask you this question, quick one. I suppose all of you eat bananas, right?
Yeah.
Can you put bananas in the fridge?
Sure.
You can.
Absolutely, you put them in the bloody fridge. They'll last 4 weeks in the fridge and 4 days outside. But you read all these little tips, do not put them in the fridge. The nitwits keep on repeating what nitwits say. It's a nitwit dialogue, nitwit, 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 nitwit. And every year we get things like, we even did an experiment at Guelph. Oh, will poinsettias kill my cat? Lilies will, but will poinsettias kill my cat? We've answered that question for 40 years in a row. No. But it's very distasteful, but they won't kill your cat. But you always get people asking the same question. You know, people don't learn. They glance at things, they don't learn. And some of the worst people are federal researchers. They don't even bloody read things. Next one. Okay, now that's marigolds planted out second and third year, and there's the Asiatics on the side of the pond there, right? They do very well, but the Asiatics were carrying disease, so they've been thinned out to those that are resistant. Now, next slide. Now, those are marigolds self-seeded in the garden again. They become almost like a dominant vegetation. But after the end of June, they're finished. They've done their job, and as they flower, when the flower stalks fire up and set seed, they go to sleep. They've done they've sized their bulbs up. They've beaten everything else to the race. You don't plant them under coniferous trees, but you plant them under deciduous trees. And look at that. They're squeezing out the competition. And they're there year after year. But the trouble with that group is they're white and pink and pink and white and white and pink. So there's some new ones coming in now because I put a lot of other seed in. Next slide. That's the first lily I ever bred. It was named after my mother, Ieuan Evans. And it turns out fortune. It's a down facing, which I like, and it's resistant to root rot. That's why it's still there. Otherwise, the rest of the lilies get white. Next. Okay, see what happens? Lilies start dying. Next slide. Okay. Corsage, I mentioned earlier. Oh, it's a wonderful lily. It's resistant, that's why it's still around. Not because it's a good lily, or a great lily, maybe it is a good lily. But it's resistant to root rot. In other words, it grows in root rot soil. Next slide. Now, these are some lilies in the garden, scattered around. They get thinned out. And by the way, one of the things that happens to my lilies, have you ever seen a lily go from big flowers to tiny little clicky little buds? That's Aster yellows. Aster yellows is a phytoplasma, and it's spread from Texas and Oklahoma every year. It sweeps up the prairies, and if it gets in the Asiatic lilies, it'll kill about 5 or 10% of them here. You have these funny lilies that grow vigorously but no flowers. You seen that in the garden?
Yeah.
That's Aster yellows. It's common, but I've never seen it written up in literature. Next slide. Now, there's a little thing there, and Lynn tipped me off into this. I put all the lilies out and I give up on them. They all bloody died. I put blocks of lilies out, and that one is called Crimson Pixie. I didn't even bother to read the bloody rest of it. So I mow it down or kill it with a rag lawn. Don't get me wrong, pesticides are fine. If we didn't have pesticides, we'd all starve, eh? I mean, can you imagine hand-weeding fields of cotton or canola or whatever? We have to, in other words. And we still live, we used to live to 50, now we live to 80. So it can't be something that's poisonous. But anyway, look at that. And that's the only lily that survived out of 10 lilies I put in. I tried again. Now, next slide. There's the crimson pixie. Next slide. Now, there's another lily. I registered 10 lilies about 15 years ago. And I call them red cow, red bull, something gold, I forget the different ones. And I put the 10 rows out. 9 rows died except that row. That's, what the hell is it called now? Copper, no. I get the name of it there. Copper something, anyway, it's in the book. It's quite a pretty lily. And it's medium size, but it's resistant. It grows in the valley of death in my garden. Next slide. Now, I did an experiment, right? I asked, the experiment is written up in this last sheet I gave you. I asked Nigel to give me 12 lilies with 3 different colors. And these are standard lilies, all named. See the maroon one up top, the yellowish one, and the orange one, right? So I had 12 lilies each, and I had 6 pots. Well, actually, I had 4 pots and 2 planting sites. So I divided them into 6, 6, 6, 6, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2 of each, right? Like, and I said, okay, we'll plant them in a pot of soil that's been sterilized. In other words, I took soil from the garden where the disease was and baked it for about 2 hours, about 300 degrees in the oven, with a mess. But got about 7 pounds and mixed it with soil mix. Now, the soil mix I use is generally used is called Sunshine Number 4. It's a blue bag thing. It's available in the States. It's much better than the other ones. But Sunshine Number 4, because it's got a wetting agent in it too. I mix it then. I put them in these 10-inch pots. See, 10-gallon pots. Sorry. Sunshine Number 4. When they put in this pot with the baked soil and the mix, one is just pure mix. Another one was pure mix with just sand, 7 pounds of sand. And then the 4th pot was 7 pounds of unsterilized Death Valley soil mixed around. So grow them on, and they all did beautifully that year. And I also put 6 of those lilies in the Death Valley, and I put 6 of those lilies in a part of my garden. It was all sandy part of my garden, and I'd never grown lilies before. I put them in a little circle actually with the sandy soil, and thought, well, we'll see how they do. Next slide. See, there they are in pots, growing nicely, eh? And the contaminated soil is kept well away from them. Next slide. And see, all 3 did really well, flowered nicely. And there's the contaminated soil to the right. See it? The fungus is not going to jump. It's not a frog. It's going to stay in the pot, you know, unless you mix the soil. So I kept them away like that. Well, they did nicely, and nice lilies. Next slide. That was the garden one in Death Valley. They came up, but it was a bit slow. But they did all flower, right, in Death Valley. And nice. And next slide. I grew the one in sandy soil and did okay. I'll show it later on. Now, I made the mistake of putting them in the garage the winter. It was a mild winter. So God, I had to put them in the greenhouse, and they flowered too early. And when I put them out in the middle of May, the frost got them. But they did okay. They grew nicely. Those are the 3 checks without the damaged soil. Next slide. Now, that was this year again now. That was the garden soil with the sandy soil that had never grown lilies before. Real crappy soil. So when you look at it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, there's 9 shoots coming up, where 6 should have come up the previous year, right? Okay, next slide. That is the Death Valley. See the dead stems there? I left them on there, 2 of them. There were 6 stems like that the last year. And I'm down to 1 bloody lily and 2 little shoots. The fungus killed them. The fungus killed them, killed them, killed them. Killed them dead. Rotted them in 1 year. Good soil. You see the cabbages and the corn I grow in that soil. In other words, a deadly fungus is in that ground. And it's in every field, every ground that's grown lilies in North America and Europe. I can guarantee that. Or pretty well much in all of them. Next slide. I'm doing my trials now. I get cabbages, actually I'm picking them now. See those rows of lilies there? Those are the resistant ones I'm growing, the middle row. Next slide. Now, these are the lilies just last week in the pots without contaminated soil. They're okay. They'll form nice bulbs. And see the damaged ones on the right. Now look at it again. Next slide. You see it's got a little paler. It didn't work as quickly as the Death Valley soil. But look how it's paler. See the paler plants? And now it's starting to show burnt edges on the leaves. So now the fungus or fungi are getting to work on it. Next slide. Slower in the pots. Then I go back to the garden where that good-looking one was left. See the Lone Ranger now is starting to die in that Death Valley soil. See the brown tips on it? The roots are being killed. The roots are being eaten by fungi. Fungus, 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 fungus. Next slide. That's it. If you have any
Do you
questions,
have any questions for Ieuan?
I gave the thing to Chuck, and question,
My
Judith?
question is, do you ever use mycorrhizal fungi to
Well,
build up a population that's enough that your other bad guys can't take
yeah,
over?
mycorrhizal though is a myth, Judith. It's more like everything's got mycorrhizae. Like, okay, canola plants, cabbage plants do not have mycorrhizae. Beet plants do not have mycorrhizae. They grow without them, completely without them. At least no known ones. But mycorrhizae, there's all kinds of different species in the soil, right? They will help out. The only reason why mycorrhizae work is if you're growing in a greenhouse and you've got sterilized soil, or soil without mycorrhizae, and you put it in and it'll help get the damping off into the fungi. But outside in the garden, your garden, if you've been growing plants, it's loaded with mycorrhizae, different mycorrhizae. And some plants grow without it. Like if I grow canola in a field, right? You know what canola is, right?
Yeah.
The better oil, better than, well, anyway. If you grow canola in the pond, do you know what canola stands for? Canadian Oleum Association. That's bad, we should change that name. Anyway,
The real name.
I'm Ola. Anyway, whoops. But anyway, canola. If you grow it too many times in the soil, you actually deplete the mycorrhizae in the soil. Many of them. Because the wheat plants then will suffer a bit. Because in other words, the mycorrhizae levels drop. There are several general mycorrhizae and specific mycorrhizae. Right? Pine trees are specific and they're general ones. But oftentimes when they sell you stuff, on these magazines and gardening journals and stuff, it's mostly useless. It's like baldness. How many people are bald here? 2, 3, 4, 5? Right. How come Prince William, with all his money, is still bald? Because do the campaigns work? No, they don't really. But the commercials do. They tell you how they cure him up and all that, right? I'd hardly, if it was that easy, it would be done. But a lot of stuff is BS we see on TV. It's gently and doesn't hurt you, but it's still advertised. You see all kinds of cures. As long as it doesn't contain a lethal chemical or something like that, it's legal to sell it. And people buy it. Fancy water, air from the mountains, all kinds of stuff like that. Any questions? Any other questions? Yes?
Can you plant anything in that soil or a bed that will clean up the soil?
Not really. The only thing you could plant is a steam engine or steam it. If you steam the soil, you probably could. There are things like mustard you can that will reduce the fungal levels, eh?
Okay.
You put in a mustard crop, and as soon as the mustard starts to flower, you plow it in, you rotate it in very quickly, and mustards will do that. You could fumigate the soil with vapam or whatever. Mustard actually produces the same thing as vapam. You could fumigate it, but not really. You could change the soil, get a JC come in there, lift the soil up and put some new soil in, or grow things in pots.
I know, but you said steam. Does that mean black tarp, black plastic?
Yes, you'd
Just
have to put a
cook-
plastic
cook
and
the
tarp
soil.
it and cook it. Like in other words,
Yeah.
when the old days when they couldn't control the fungi, you have to, but it would reduce the level. Likely it might even eliminate it, but that, unlikely. But then you start with new bulbs, eh? The
Right.
Dutch sell you bulbs, if they're Asiatic ones, they're clean.
Okay.
Because they grew them in tissue culture in Ghana or Nigeria, and then they send these pea-sized things, you know, to Latvia, Lithuania, or Chile, and they grow them on for 2 years, and they go back to Holland. They're not Dutch grown. They were grown in Holland. They'd have 10 times more diseases on them, and then they ship them out, and they 90% go for the flower trade, and 10% for the backyard garden.
Mhm.
So in other words, then they clean. That's why those are Dutch bulbs. They were clean. I assume they would be clean. Because possibly might be one fungus on them, but that's the thing. Any other questions?
Yeah, you said, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
If you have a bulb and if you put it in the 10% bleach, would it kill the fungus?
You put in 10% bleach, you might kill some of it, but it doesn't get in all the cracks. And the fungi are pretty resistant, eh? Some of them are like the Pythium has spores, and they're resistant. You'd have to cook the damn thing up to about 180 degrees to kill it. It's really hard. It would help. It would help, definitely. I put 3 or 4 fungi with them as well when I grow these things, and it likely will suppress and or kill, because if they germinate, it would help them. But I would doubt if it would eliminate them completely. But it's really hard. The only systems like the potato, you either go through tissue culture or bulbils. You know, if you take bulbils off a lily and plant them in another part of the garden, you don't have disease, because they're clean. It's not virus. It's not spread in the plant. It's at the roots. It's the roots, the roots, the roots, the roots. And without roots, plants can't grow.
Ieuan, will a systemic fungicide do anything to them?
A systemic fungicide, but we don't have many systemic fungicides. We have insecticides and virtually no systemic fungicides, and none that would be specific to each of the different 4 fungi, eh? Because you need a fungicide for each fungus, eh?
Yeah.
No, it's one of those things you would always have to go the potato way. And I'll try and write it up by next year, if Chuck will print it. And sort of like how to grow disease-free lilies, or try to grow disease-free lilies. Because, you know, I hate to see these people go all the way to North Vietnam or somewhere, or South Vietnam or somewhere, or up in the mountains, and bring this little lily plant back. And no concept of disease they spread. None whatsoever. And by the way, I'm an advocate. My nickname on the prairies is Dr. Copper. You know, we tend to think of forget of micronutrients, and most of the Miracle Grow and other things do contain micronutrients, eh? But if you have trouble with things like slugs and stuff. Now, what's different between a slug, an octopus, a shellfish, and us? Their blood is copper-based. People never realize that. You know, so if you want to keep slugs away, put a copper sheet down, do this. Bullshit, why don't scientists read? All you need is copper sulfate and spray the ground. You don't spray the plant with it, but you spray the ground around, you get rid of slugs. People cannot put 2 and 2 together, and they're paid very well. No, that's true though, Peggy, you know what I mean? They just have the inability to in other words, join the dots. Anybody else are comfortable or?
Yeah, I got a question, yeah. Because you're saying that the fungus is in the soil.
Right.
So, and how long do you figure if, let's say you have a lily bed and you take all the lilies out, how long would it be before that bed? Or there's not enough research yet done on it, whether it's...
Well,
1
maybe
year,
maybe
4
like
years?
ready to be granddaughter, perhaps. 20 years, 30 years. See, some of these fungi last 20 years in the soil.
And then, yeah, so the next question I got is, because you said something about all these lilies in the fields and the wild lilies and everything else.
Well, they
Do you
move around by
think that,
seed.
let's say, if I go from, let's say, your garden where it's the Death Valley,
Yeah.
and have it on my runners, and let's say I go out lily hunting, orchid hunting, would I bring that disease out to the wild?
Possibly, but
You
you're going to
said-
walk a lot of places, you might bring it out. But if it's in the wild, that lily, that plant will die, but it'll blow seed maybe 10 miles away, and it'll grow up in another spot. That's how the wild ones exist. They blow around all the time. You go to one field that's full of wild lilies, go by in 5 years, they're all gone, but in a field 2 miles away. You know, they move around, eh? plants move around in the wild, eh? Big things of it, so you really wouldn't harm them because it's been there all the time. But when you keep planting lilies in the same garden, you've brought all the disease from all around the world into the garden, eh? That's the unfortunate thing. Well, maybe I should conclude on that and thank BC personally. This is fantastic, eh? Fantastic job they've done. I'd like to sort of thank them for that.
They have.
My eldest daughter will be coming tomorrow. That's the real Megan Evans. And I did say awards. My passion was rugby, eh? And next week I'll be inducted into the Canadian Rugby Hall of Fame, or whatever it is. So I have to wear a suit and tie. I have to look forward. Pardon? No, I have to. Could be. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.